Yo, what is up, everybody? It is IRHCase20. We are here with more Mr. Ballen stories. We got Mr. B up in the house today. Today we have her death touch baffled doctors. I mean, I don't really got any predictions. It sounds like it's telling us exactly what's going to happen. I mean, you know what I mean? The only thing that came to my mind is that one character from the X-Men. Don't remember the name. I kind of remember like the first X-Men movie they ever made. I just remember her character's really cute, and so I was very invested in that character. But you know, she could touch people and like drain their powers in their life and whatnot. That's the only thing that came to mind. I don't think that's gonna be it. To be completely honest. Well, I want to be joking and be like, I'm pretty sure that's it. But I don't know. Maybe that's where they got the idea for that character or something. You know, from this probably true story or whatnot. I'm sure it went viral if this person was literally touching someone and they died. Like, anyways, let's not waste any more time, Mr. Ballen. Take it away, brother. Give me another amazing story. I want to hear it.
In 1994, a 31-year-old mother was rushed into an emergency room in California with a severely elevated heart rate, her blood pressure was very low, and she was struggling to breathe. As soon as she arrived, the doctors and nurses in this ER, who were very accustomed to getting patients like her, got right to work. And as they're treating her, one of the doctors noticed something very strange about the patient. But before this doctor could tell the other nurses and doctors about this anomaly, there was this loud thud inside of the trauma room they were inside of. And then before long, there was another thud, and then someone started screaming, and then minutes later, the entire hospital would be evacuated. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do. And we.
So it sounds like there was something wrong with her. Like, I don't know, maybe she got like an unusual, unusually high. God, what the fuck? I've been working all day. It's the middle of the night. Give me a break. It's like midnight. Came into contact with a unusually high amount of like radiation or something, and it was causing like issues and whatnot. That's why she had to be rushed to hospital. I mean, I think your hair would fall out too, so maybe not. But like, had something wrong, like something highly toxic on her body, and you know, with the doctors and nurses and stuff were touching her, and like, you know, whatnot. It was, it could, you know, switching to them before someone could be like, "Oh, stop touching her," and people started fucking passing out. This is gonna be one hell of a story.
We upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please sneak in to the like button's house and set all of their clocks back 1 hour. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications.
I mean, that's not really the worst thing you could do, the like button. Like, you know, maybe the like button shows up everywhere late, so you're actually gonna get them to show up on time and whatnot. Kind of doing nice stuff for the like button.
So you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. On the night of February 19th, 1994, a man in Southern California called 911 because his girlfriend was struggling to breathe. When the 911 dispatcher picked up this man's call, he was very distraught and asked them to please send an ambulance as fast as you possibly can. But despite how upset this man was on the phone, he was not actually surprised this situation was unfolding. His girlfriend, 31-year-old Gloria Ramirez, had been diagnosed with terminal cervical cancer just 6 weeks earlier, and the doctors had told her that she likely did not have much time left. And, making this even more tragic, Gloria had actually gone into the hospital a few years earlier with symptoms and signs that she likely had cancer, but the doctors missed it. Had they caught it back then, they likely could have saved her. Right. Still, after receiving her very grim diagnosis just a few weeks earlier, Gloria had resolved to fight her cancer as best as she could. After all, she had a lot to lose. Gloria had 2 young kids. She had a boy and a girl who were 9 and 12 years old, respectively. And Gloria absolutely adored them and really devoted her life to them. In the evenings, she would play with them and help them with.
So, this is what I thought. How'd y'all miss that, docs? Like, she came in with signs and symptoms that might involve potentially having cancer. Don't you, like, scan for that shit? Maybe, I mean, benefit of the doubt. Maybe they did. Maybe they just didn't catch it. But, like, how the fuck y'all missed that? So, cancer, was she getting treatment for the cancer? I mean, this is early 90s. You know? Medicine is... Every like decade that goes by, medicine and practices, evolve and get better and better, at least in theory. We hope they do, and whatnot. So, my roommate has had to have radiation treatment twice. Did she go through a similar kind of radiation treatment and whatnot, and was like technically considered highly radioactive? That's my guess.
Their homework, and the whole time she'd be cracking jokes to make them laugh and smile. And then even when Gloria was not actively parenting her kids.
Really? Is that not a real photo of Gloria? I don't know why. I just saw the last photo of Gloria and I thought, like, damn, that's like a spitting image.
She was always a very positive presence in their lives. She was optimistic, she was happy, she was upbeat, and oftentimes she could be found wandering around with a big smile on her face, singing a religious hymn to herself. So, when Gloria got this terrible news that she had late-stage cancer, she was obviously terrified and sad, but she was also very determined to find a way to survive because she knew her kids still needed her. Around the time Gloria was diagnosed, her doctors told her she would begin radiation treatment for her cancer at the end of February, so she had a few weeks to wait. And so during this waiting period, Gloria found herself spending a lot of time researching her disease,
Wait, did she get radiation treatment and then decide, I know how to beat cancer? I'm gonna, their doctors think I can't handle more radiation. The human body can. I'm gonna double it. Did she go crazy? And that's why she was like really toxic to even be near?
Looking for things she could be doing on her own right now to make herself feel better or even potentially increase the odds of her survival. So, on February 19th, when Gloria told her boyfriend that she was starting to have some issues breathing, the boyfriend didn't hesitate for a second to call 911 because he knew firsthand from living with Gloria that she was desperate to survive. And so any changes in her symptoms needed to be treated like an emergency. It was around 8 p.m. that night when the ambulance pulled up in front of Gloria's home. Paramedics climbed out, they rushed over to Gloria, they put her on a stretcher, they gave her a mask with oxygen, and then they loaded her into the back of the ambulance, and then seconds later, they were flying down the road with their sirens blaring. While they sped toward the hospital in Riverside, which is a city about an hour east of Los Angeles, one of the paramedics on board the ambulance called ahead to the Riverside Hospital emergency room to talk to one of the doctors. And the doctor who answered was a 33-year-old woman named Dr. Julie Gorczynski. And she loved her job. She loved the thrill and excitement and challenge of working in a big city emergency room. And so she takes this call. The paramedics tell her that they have a patient who has terminal cancer. She's having a hard time breathing, and her heart rate is becoming very unstable to the point where if it's not controlled soon, it's going to kill her. And they told Julie they would be there in about 5 minutes. And so Julie, she hangs up the phone and immediately began preparing for receiving a critical patient, as well as getting trauma room 1 ready, which is where Gloria would be treated. Now, as bad as this situation was for Gloria, for Julie and the other nurses and doctors in this emergency room, this was kind of business as usual. They were used to receiving patients that were in very rough shape. And so as Julie and the rest of her medical team waited for this ambulance to arrive, none of them were worried that they wouldn't be able to handle this patient. They thought tonight was going to be as routine as any other night. However, they would be very, very wrong. The ambulance ride took about 15 minutes, so they pulled into the Riverside Hospital right at 8:15 p.m. And as soon as the ambulance came to a stop, the paramedics jumped out, they ran around to the back, they opened up the back doors, they pulled Gloria out still on her stretcher, and they pushed her as fast as they could through the doors into the emergency room. Once inside, Julie and the rest of her team, they took Gloria and they pushed her left down a hallway into trauma room 1. Once inside, the doctors and nurses immediately noticed that Gloria's heart rate was spiking dramatically and her blood pressure was falling dramatically. So Julie and her team began administering a standard set of treatments for someone in this condition. They switched Gloria's oxygen mask she had been using on the ambulance ride for a more powerful one. They gave her painkillers, sedatives, and drugs to help.
Yeah, that was my first guess. Was they're gonna administer sedatives to try to really calm that heart down, and I imagine some kind of something to get the blood pressure up. I don't know what you would do there. I'm thinking blood sugar, and I don't think this is the same treatment. Give her sugar pills. Yeah, I don't know what to do there, but sedative is the first place my brain went.
Steady her heartbeat. And at first, the treatments seemed to be working because pretty quickly Gloria's heartbeat began to level out. However, it didn't last. Soon, Gloria's heartbeat was racing so insanely fast that all of these alarms were going off on her heartbeat monitor. Knowing they had to act quickly, yeah. Julie and her team began
her heart's about to either stop or explode. Holy shit.
Removing Gloria's t-shirt in order to administer electric shocks to her chest with paddles. This is a way for doctors to kind of reset a patient's heartbeat. As the nurses got the electric paddles ready, they and the rest of the medical team suddenly noticed two strange things about Gloria. The first was that Gloria seemed to be emitting this strange garlicky smell from her mouth. The second was Gloria's skin looked very greasy. However, despite the entire medical team taking note of these two things, no one thought they were significant. Lots of patients suddenly are brought into the ER, and very rarely do they have a chance to shower or brush their teeth beforehand.
Of course.
And so they figured that was the reason she looked and smelled that way. Right. Finally, the big electrical paddles were ready, and so the nurses placed them on either side of Gloria's heart, and then they began sending powerful bolts of electricity into Gloria's chest. While the nurses worked on Gloria's heart, other members of the medical team needed to assess Gloria's overall condition, and so to do that, they needed to draw her blood. So a nurse took an alcohol wipe and cleaned a small spot.
If she is highly radioactive, first not only touching this greasy, the greasy stuff coming off of her skin and whatnot, but also opening any part of the skin up, even that small little hole of poking and whatnot, that could be really bad, especially the blood itself is probably highly radioactive as well. So, this can't be good. It's about to get crazy in here.
On Gloria's arm, and then she took a syringe and jabbed it inside of Gloria and began the draw. And as soon as she did this, trauma room 1 filled with a new smell. It was a chemical smell. And Julie immediately noticed it, and she looked.
Yeah, as I said, they opened the body up, even in that tiny little hole. If he's that radioactive, bad.
Looked over at the nurse doing the blood draw, and she said, "I think it smells like ammonia in here." And the nurse, who was doing the blood draw, kind of scrunched her face up in disgust and nodded in agreement. The nurse finished the blood draw and then handed the blood vial to Julie.
Okay,
and
that should have been a warning sign there. It's like the second she started drawing blood, a weird chemical smell started happening. I was like, guys, something's not right here. Of course, you don't have really time to stop and assess. She's about to fucking die. Which, I think, spoiler alert, I don't think she makes it out of here at all. Clearly. She probably killed herself by this point. With whatever she did to make this happen, whether it was extra radiation or what have you. Yeah, now that it's been exposed, it is airborne to everyone in the room. Oh, yeah, they're gonna start dropping.
As Julie was taking this blood vial from the nurse, she noticed the nurse looked suddenly very confused and very disoriented.
Yeah.
Her eyes were kind of flickering and she was staring straight ahead like she didn't know where she was. And so Julie, she sees this in the nurse, and then she glances down at this blood vial in her own hand now,
green?
and she sees something she's never seen before. The blood inside this vial, Gloria's blood, was full of these small white crystals. But
I mean, this ain't the Hulk or anything. Green blood would be interesting, but like, yeah, that would be fucking hilarious. It's like, this is green. Like, what do you do as a doctor in that moment? Just like, what the fuck? But yeah, that's also weird.
before Julie could tell anybody else in the room about these strange crystals in the patient's blood, the nurse who had done the blood draw went from being dazed and confused to collapsing on the ground. Luckily, another doctor had seen the nurse starting to collapse and dove out and caught her right before her head hit the ground.
Good.
This collapsed nurse was very quickly placed on a stretcher and wheeled out of Trauma Room 1 so the other doctors and nurses could focus on Gloria, who was obviously dying. And so Julie, who was still just standing in the middle of this room holding this vial of blood, was wondering what the heck just happened to her colleague. And she's also looking down at these crystals thinking, I've never seen this before. What does this mean? And right as she was about to flag one of the other medical team members over to look at it, Julie began feeling very nauseous and her head started spinning. And then she felt like she might collapse. And so not wanting to cause any more distractions for the main team, she quickly placed this vial of blood on a nearby tray. And then she quickly made her way out of Trauma Room 1 and sat down in a nearby chair. And as soon as she sat down, another staff member at the hospital who had not been inside of the trauma room ran over to Julie and asked her, hey, are you okay? And Julie, she looked up at the staff member and she tried to speak, but she couldn't. And then her eyes rolled back into her skull and she slumped forward and fell to the ground. And at the same moment that Julie was collapsing outside of Trauma Room 1, inside of the trauma room, there was another thud as another nurse collapsed, and then another, and then another, and
Jesus. Dude. Like, this is straight from, like, a horror movie. From, like, some kind of, like, zombie horror movie, or some kind of, like, 30 Days Later, whatever those movies are. Like, this is some straight shit from there, you know what I mean? Like, this would have been extremely traumatic. I hope they're all okay. Like, I hope this isn't, like, poisoning them in some way, shape, or form.
For long, screams were coming out of Trauma Room 1 as people inside who had not collapsed yet are looking around, seeing their colleagues just dropping like flies for no reason. And so pretty quickly, the call came out over the hospital intercom to evacuate the hospital. The only people that would stay back would be a skeleton crew of doctors and nurses and Gloria, because they felt like moving Gloria outside right now would likely kill her. We need to save her right now. Outside the hospital, the parking lot very quickly filled up with doctors and nurses and other sick people on stretchers. People were screaming and crying, sirens were blaring, and the medical staff that was still healthy was running all over the place looking for supplies to help treat their coworkers. Meanwhile, back inside of Trauma Room 1, things for Gloria only seemed to be getting worse. The 4 doctors and nurses who had stayed back continued to administer more drugs, more shocks to her chest, more oxygen, but no matter what they did, her blood pressure continued to fall and her heartbeat became fainter and fainter and fainter. Finally, at 8:50 p.m., roughly 35 minutes after Gloria had first been wheeled into the emergency room, she died. In that 35-minute window, 23 of Riverside Hospital staff had either collapsed or become very sick and then collapsed, and many of them had to be hospitalized.
Yeah.
But the most affected person by far was Julie. She was in such bad shape by the time she made it out to the parking lot that she was actually put on an ambulance from her hospital and driven to another hospital where she was in.
Oh, guys, it's like zombies. Zombie 101 is going to start spreading to hospitals. Yo, this story is crazy, man. This story is absolutely fucking nuts, yo.
Admitted to their intensive care unit. And there, a nurse drew her blood, and in it were little white crystals, just like in Gloria's blood.
Well, it sounds like some kind of like drug or something, but Maybe, I mean, I don't know what happens to your body and whatnot, and radiation and whatnot. I know your hair falls out, like your teeth starts falling out, like, you know, just figure shit starts happening in your body, but I don't know what happens to bloodstream or whatnot. So, is it radiation? Is it some kind of crazy drug that's being passed around? I don't know. She tried some experimental blood that when your blood becomes airborne, like it affects everyone else. Like, shit, man, what's going on here?
At 11
Some
p.m.
zombie
on the
shit.
same night all this craziness happened, a hazardous materials team dressed in full hazmat suits
You have to be.
entered the Riverside Hospital to look for a chemical leak, because that was the running theory that some sort of leak had happened in the
Yeah.
hospital. It had made its
From her
way
body.
into Trauma Room 1, and that's what had caused everyone to collapse and get sick. But despite an extensive search, the hazmat team did not find any leaks. Stumped, authorities decided to just be extra careful around this hospital and around Gloria's body until they figured out what had happened.
is going on?
Because the fear was there was some sort of unknown or hidden toxin either in this building or on or in Gloria's body. 6 days after the incident, inside of a special airtight room, while wearing full body protective suits, doctors performed an autopsy on Gloria. And they discovered there was absolutely nothing toxic inside of her. In fact, the autopsy only revealed that Gloria had died of natural causes. Her cancer had caused her heart and her kidneys to fail. Meanwhile, although the other medical staff members who had gotten sick inside of Trauma Room 1 had mostly recovered, Julie just could not seem to get any better. She had breathing problems and pancreatitis, which is the inflammation of the pancreas, and it's very painful. And her bones were literally just starting to die, leaving her in a wheelchair. Gloria's family blamed Riverside Hospital for Gloria's death.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it was their fault. I mean, we knowing what we know, obviously, like, it just looks like, from their point of view, they brought him to the hospital and like some kind of weird gas leak happened that killed her or something like that. Like, I can understand their perspective of that and whatnot, but like knowing what we know, it's like, oh yeah, what was that? What was that the problem? Or was your girl crazy and tried some experimental shit? Or just like I could take another hit of radiation, bring it on. You know what I mean? Like, you know.
Insisting that these toxic fumes that must have been present inside of Trauma Room 1 came from the hospital, and those fumes are responsible for what happened to the staff, and they are responsible for killing Gloria. And in fact, 3 times in the 3 years leading up to Gloria's death, Riverside Hospital had had some issues with hazardous materials making their way into the hospital. There was sewer gas that came in from a drain. There was a toxic gas that
Okay, you know, that's helping their theory. Definitely helping their theory.
was created from a sterilizer that made 2 people in the hospital sick, and some of the hospital's water was found to have algae in it.
You're in a hospital. How you you should be the healthiest place out of anywhere in the world, right? Is that the irony? Is that a hospital might actually be more like toxic than like an average place? Interesting.
But the hospital said they checked their hospital, there was no leak, we did not cause whatever toxic fumes were inside of Trauma Room 1, and so we are not responsible for what happened to our staff or what happened to Gloria. Riverside Hospital would be searched again and again for some sort of leak. Also, Gloria's home would be searched for toxic gases, and Gloria would be autopsied 2 additional times. But no one could find anything toxic anywhere.
Is anyone checking these crystals in the blood? Both from either of the 2 people that it come out of? Is there anyone checking this?
So, eventually, California's Department of Human and Health Services came forward and said they had the answer to what had happened inside of Trauma Room 1. They said it was mass sociogenic illness. Mass sociogenic illness is when a group of people all believe they have the same illness.
Yeah, it's like it's very much, it'd be like, you know, people that are whatever that condition is that makes you think that you're sick when you're not. Like, you know, when someone's like, oh yeah, I heard that you have a cough, it means you have cancer. It's like, oh, I've been coughing, I think I have cancer. You know, that kind of condition. I don't know why the term's not coming to me. Again, it's midnight, like my brain ain't working. Hypochondriac, there we go. It's like kind of like the same thing, but just like in a mass kind of scenario and whatnot. Don't think that's it. I really don't think that's it.
Even though there's nothing wrong with any of them. It's caused by fear and anxiety. Basically, the state of California was saying that Julie and the other 22 staff members who had gotten sick and collapsed had just pretended. They were making it up. As for Gloria, they said she just died from her cancer. Now, of course, this explanation made a lot of people unhappy, like Gloria's family, and of course Julie, whose medical problems were very well documented. She couldn't walk anymore because her bones were literally dying. And so Gloria's family and Julie said, you know what, we think the hospital is covering something up, and we are going to sue. But before they did, an obscure lab located just outside of San Francisco, California, it was called the Forensic Science Center, was called in to do yet another investigation into what happened inside of Riverside Hospital. And what these scientists found would make history. Here is what they discovered. After Gloria was diagnosed with cancer, she began researching not only her disease.
It's eyebrows, though. like, this is the 90s. This is when, like, thin was the thing, you know? Like, if the 90s, maybe early 2K, it's like really thin eyebrows was like the thing. Now it's like thick painted on brows is like the hot shit now. I don't know why. It looks weird, but people think it makes them look attractive. I don't know. Just natural eyebrows. Try that. Pretty hot. Could throw them out there. Anyways, weirdly thin eyebrows.
But also alternative treatments that she could do on her own before she began her radiation treatment at the end of February. And according to the scientists of Forensic Science Center, Gloria must have begun using a well-known controversial home remedy to help with her pain. It was called dimethyl sulfoxide, or DMSO for short. In the 1960s, DMSO was prescribed to treat pain and anxiety, but as it became more popular, it was discovered that it could cause eye damage, and so the government said, you can't use this anymore. But even though DMSO was no longer available as a medicine, it was still being sold in gel form inside of hardware stores as a heavy-duty degreaser. And it was
the grease on the skin. Oh no.
This type of DMSO, the gel form, that Gloria had begun rubbing all over her skin, head to toe. This was the reason when she arrived in the emergency room, her skin looked greasy.
So, what happens when you perform an autopsy? Like, no one checked the contents of her flesh when it continued to look greasy even after long periods of time. Like, what like, this is, I mean, again, you know, 80s and 90s, I don't know if it's much of an excuse, but like, you know, medicine has evolved in the last 20, 30, 40 years by a lot, and people are maybe more cautious now or something. But this is just like, you know, the Secret Genius Kill for Fun video that I watched so long ago. It's been a while. We've been on a long journey, a long ride here. I love it. To where it's just like, oh, like we just didn't test for it. It's just like when you do your first baseline tests and it all comes back negative, at what point do you not be like, okay, let's extend our search and test for other possible toxins, like ones that, like, why on earth would it be that one, but let's test anyway. Like, why is this not what happens? You know what I mean? Like, how come, like, someone was just like, man, it's been like 24 hours, her skin's still greasy. Sure, that's irrelevant. I mean, like, what? Am I the crazy one? Like, who doesn't check this shit? Maybe they did, and maybe by that point it didn't come back as anything or something. Maybe we give them the benefit of the doubt, but it's just like, who doesn't check this shit? Who doesn't check the crystals in the motherfucking blood? Or maybe they do, and maybe, again, we just didn't have the technology, and it just came back as like, we don't know what that is. It's fucking weird. No one thought that was fucking weird? No one checked that shit? What do you do at a hospital? Like, what the fuck do you guys do? Because apparently you don't check things. What the fuck? You didn't catch the cancer. You didn't even think twice about crystals in blood. Like, what even? Why are you charging thousands of dollars if you ain't even doing your fucking job? Like, I'm just throwing that one out there. Just a food for thought, really. Anyways.
Because she was literally covered head to toe in this gel. It was also why her breath smelled like garlic. Because after DMSO is absorbed into your bloodstream, you emit a sort of garlicky smell both through your pores and out of your mouth. But the discovery that Gloria had been using DMSO did not account for why all these people in the hospital began collapsing and falling ill when they were...
I imagine, there's a possibility. Maybe we're going to find out what it is here in a second. I know I'm just pausing when I could just figure it out. Mr. B would tell me. I get that. I just like to guess. Sorry. Maybe that stuff by itself is probably maybe not great for you, but like when that got heightened by radiation that happened after that, maybe it just caused some crazy chemical reaction or something. That's my guess. Very interesting.
Around her. It turned out on the night that Gloria's boyfriend called 911 because Gloria was suffering from breathing problems, Gloria was also suffering from another medical issue, but it was so minor, the boyfriend didn't think to bring it up to the 911 dispatcher or to the paramedics when they arrived. And this secret medical condition that Gloria had was a urinary tract infection, which is an infection in any part of the urinary system. Right. These are very common and usually very easy to treat. But what nobody realized was that because Gloria had this infection, her body was not flushing out the DMSO chemicals that had seeped inside of it from all this gel on her skin. Still, even very large amounts of DMSO chemicals inside of your body or on your skin is not enough to cause any harm to you or people around you. The danger started when the EMTs in the ambulance put that oxygen mask on Gloria's face as they transported her to the hospital. Suddenly, there was this new chemical being introduced into Gloria's body, oxygen. Right. And the scientists from the Forensic Science Center said this new chemical, oxygen, began interacting with the DMSO chemicals trapped inside of Gloria's body, and together they formed a new chemical. Now, if Gloria had gotten to the hospital and responded more positively to the treatments and medicines that the doctors and nurses at the ER gave her, then Julie and the rest of the staff inside of that hospital would never have gotten sick. For that to happen, for that catastrophe to play out inside of that hospital, two very specific things had to happen in the correct order. And they did. First, there was the electric shocks. When the medical team was pumping electrical shocks into Gloria's chest, the scientists from the Forensic Science Center say those charges of electricity interacted with that new chemical that had been created inside of Gloria, and it changed this new chemical again. And this time, the change made the chemical deadly. It became what's known as dimethyl sulfate, which was used as a chemical weapon in World War I.
I heard of that one.
Once Gloria received those shocks to her chest, her body basically became a canister of nerve gas. And then one of the nurses drew Gloria's blood, which was the second event that ultimately set off the catastrophe. Emergency rooms are typically kept fairly cold, roughly 66 degrees Fahrenheit. But when this new deadly chemical was created inside of Gloria, it was still inside of her body where it was warm. And for dimethyl sulfate, when it is warm, it's unstable and much less dangerous. But when that nurse drew Gloria's blood, inside of the blood was the deadly chemical, and now it was no longer in Gloria, it was in this cool 66-degree room, and so it began to stabilize and started producing those little white crystals inside of the blood vial that Julie saw, and as it stabilized, it turned into a gas, and it filled the room, and the staff began to breathe it in. The scientists from the Forensic Science Center do not think that this mass poisoning event contributed to Gloria's death, meaning Gloria did really die from her cancer.
Even with it, this chemical inside her probably didn't help, but she was gonna die anyways. Like, let's be real, especially in the early '90s, like catching terminal cancer that late. Yeah, you did. Ain't no kind of treatment that's really gonna save you. Maybe prolong your life a little bit, but there ain't no treatment that's gonna save you. Like you did. So like, even if it wasn't that night, even if they managed to stabilize her, for not with the shocks and everything, even if that didn't cause the chemical reaction and whatnot. If it wasn't that night, it would have been maybe a few months for then. Like she was probably gonna die regardless. Like, I mean, miracles happen, but like she was probably dead anyway. So
Gloria's family has denied that Gloria ever used DMSO, and they still insist that the hospital was responsible for Gloria's death. The hospital would ultimately pay $800,000 in settlement money to Gloria's family, but the hospital would never admit that they did anything wrong. Julie's lawsuit against the hospital was ultimately dismissed, and her bones never really recovered from the damage that was done to them, despite 8 surgeries to try to fix them. However, Julie would eventually go back to being a practicing doctor at another hospital, and she has said the ordeal she went through inside of Trauma Room 1 at Riverside Hospital actually made her a better doctor. So that's going to do it. If you got something...
Huh. Well, would you look at that? Wow, 800 fucking thousand. Hospital's got a lot of money, man. Hospital's got a lot of fucking money. I don't know. I know it's hard to lose a mom and a loved one and whatnot, but being like, nah, you guys are lying, we're still suing you. I get it. Like, I understand you gotta put that anger somewhere, and you know, for some, if it's just like, dude, they did 3 autopsies and they didn't discover this stuff on her skin, which I mean, does sound a little fishy. I ain't gonna hold you. And like said that nothing happened to her. The place has been searched. I mean, the place was searched multiple times, but they're like, oh, they're just covering up. It's like, I mean, the people in the hazmat suits aren't part of the hospital. They don't, you know, it's not like they've been like, hey, we'll give you a couple grand, like if you guys like say nothing was there, you know. I don't think anything like that's going on. I'm pretty sure there's people in hazmat would love to be like, yeah, it's right here, guys, you dumb fucks. You know what I mean? So like, I don't think they're covering up, but the fact that it's just like our family member died, we need money as to make us feel better for reparations. It's like, I get like, you know, someone who, I mean, she was gonna die anyways. It's not like she was gonna be paying the bills for much longer anyways. So like, you know, a little bit of financial reparation, and technically, if you want to look at it that way, restoring their funds. Like, you know, some compensation to like help them, you know, pay for the funeral, to you know, survive, you know, with all the extra bills for kids without a mom now and whatnot and all that. Sure, but 800 grand? It's like nothing will bring back my mother, but this helps. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you know. But like, that is one hell of an interesting story, man. That's one hell of a motherfucking interesting story right there. So I was close and far off at the same time, but like how are you supposed to predict that one chemical is mixing with another chemical and being shocked into a different chemical? But you know, you know, the second they're drawing the blood, I was just like, oh, you're opening the body now. Like, uh-oh, you're all fucked now. So I was on about that. But yeah, it's just baffling that no one checked the crystals. Like, I don't know if maybe I assume they must have, right? Because no one's just like, I'm sure this is irrelevant. Like, or maybe as everything like changed and whatnot, the crystals deformed and whatnot. So everyone was just like, oh, it's just normal blood vial here. And I don't know, I guess the people that drew the doctor's blood didn't like. Yeah, I don't know. Didn't check it or something, or it just came back as like, yeah, don't know what this is. It's weird though. Well, we'll try to figure it out, but what even is it? I assume maybe that. I want to say that that's what happened. Just, benefit of the doubt to these doctors that they're not just looking at that like that's weird and tossing it. You know what I mean? So I want to give the benefit of the doubt to these doctors. Just because it wasn't said doesn't mean it wasn't done. So like, let's just hope that they checked it. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like, again, I understand the family's point of view, but like at the same time, like, she was gonna die anyway. I feel like they should have known if she was rubbing something on her skin. Well, I mean, the boyfriend should have known, but you got a lot else on your plate at that point, like worrying about her. Yeah, I don't know. Were they dating or were they married? Can't remember. I think it said boyfriend. Like who's gonna take care of the kids at that point? Because I mean, luckily they weren't infants, and possibly also unfortunately they weren't infants because they didn't know that their mom died on that day, and they have to live with that for the rest of their life. That some crazy chemical leak shit happened, and they blame the hospital for it. Which I mean, could have been. I can't necessarily blame the family. That does sound like a very unrealistic, like, okay, you guys are clearly just making shit up kind of story. Like, oh, one chemical mixed with oxygen, that turned into a different chemical, and they shocked it, and that shock turned into a different chemical, and then the chemical released. That does sound like some crazy zany shit. That's like, I don't know if I believe it either, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So like, I get that, but like at the same time, man, like, $800,000. Like, fuck. I fucking, I don't know that much. Like, I don't know, 50, $100,000, but $800,000. Like, she was gonna die anyways, and they tried their hardest to save her, even with a lot of their doctors possibly dropping, as far as they know, dropping dead on the spot. They still tried to save her. Like, so $800,000, you know what I mean? That's a little fucked, guys. But like, all right, whatever. So yeah, that's gonna do it here today. Next one, I should go to bed, but you know what? I really want to see that Bell Witch Haunting, so I think we're gonna have to pop that one too. You know what I mean? We're gonna pop that one too. Was there another one after that? I don't remember. Oh yeah, The Village. We're gonna watch The Village, and then we're gonna start heading back downwards and whatnot. Yeah, definitely want to check that one. So, thank you for joining me here today. That was a fascinating story. I think there was a little bit more pause in there than normal. So, like, my bad on that. But, I feel like if you've watched a few of this stuff or just my stuff in general, you should be used to it by now. So, I don't know. Get over it. Thank you for joining me. I'll see y'all next time.